All right, well, thank you everyone, and welcome to the annual general meeting for Tuans for 2020. And well, what a year. I think this is the first time that Tuans has had to undertake its AGM virtually, but I guess that's what 2020 will go down in history as, is the virtual year. So it's a very quick meeting today. It's obviously, we've got a few technical challenges ahead of us to work through the AGM in terms of getting your feedback and also undertaking some voting. We've also got the digital symposium starting hard at 3:30, so we do want to move through the AGM fairly quickly. Just a few housekeeping things. Please, if you have any questions or comments, put those in the chat. And there is a couple of matters that we need to vote on as part of the AGM, and they will pop up on your screen, and you can vote straight away, and we will make the results of that voting available in a couple of days, because we need to go through and scrutinise those before releasing them. So let's get on with it. Next screen, please, Craig. So there's the agenda. I'll do a quick welcome, and then I'll hand over to provide a quick report from the chair. I'll then hand over to Jenna Woolley, who's our contact officer, who will be going through some constitutional changes in the finance report, and then we'll be handing over to our CEO to do his report, and then back with me to close out with the election results for the new board for FY21, general business, and closing of the meeting. So next slide, Craig. So we've had a number of apologies and proxies, and those are on your screen. A copy of the presentation will be available after the AGM. So we'll just take that slide as read and move on to the next slide. So minutes of the AGM. So Chantel from Tuans has posted a copy of the minutes from the 2019 AGM. Obviously normally we would get a show of hands, but instead this time you would have just seen a poll pop up on your screen. If you could approve the minutes of the 2019 AGM as a true and accurate record of the meeting, and if you have any questions or comments about those minutes, if you could put that into the Q&A chat. And I'll just pause there for 30 seconds to allow you to complete that poll. Right, if we move on to the next slide, Craig. And to the chairman's report. Next slide, please, Craig. Well, as I said in my opening address, 2020 has been a year of great uncertainty and great disruption. Some reflections in terms of Tuans over the last year have been mixed. We certainly came into 2020 with great ambitions and plans, and we only managed to have one in-person event at the beginning of the year. I think it was on the 19th of March before we went to lockdown. And so as an organisation, we've had to pivot very, very quickly, and I'll talk about that shortly. So some of the sort of highlights from the past year. Last year, the board did some work around looking at whether we should change our name, and that'll be one of the items that come up very shortly in the change of the constitution. And we went out to members, and there was a resounding support for that, to make a simple but strategic change from telecommunications to technology. And that's really about providing us with a broader platform. It will allow us, I believe, or the board believes, to move from surviving year to year to thriving for the years to come, and what is not only a rapidly changing world, but also quite an uncertain one at the moment. So it's a really exciting opportunity. one of the key things in our aspirations is really to grow our membership and it's to extend our influence, build those relationships with more partners, and our mission is to really ensure that every Kiwi user of technology is benefiting from living and connecting in a digital world, and I think that's what a user organisation can do. And telecommunications is now an inherent part of the technology landscape. So we've certainly not forgotten about telecommunications. We're not leaving it behind by any stretch of the imagination. And I guess a special recognition to our telco members. This is now wrapped within our connectivity pillar, which, as we all know, is much more than the dial-up telephone. Earlier this year, we started on a 3-year business strategy, and that work has continued through COVID. We had planned to have that in place by this AGM, but the need to respond to COVID and to pivot the organisation has meant that we've slowed that down, but it's certainly not. We certainly haven't forgotten about it, and will be one of the actions for the new board to endorse that plan, and then we'll get that plan out to our members, and that will be our guiding document to ensure that we are delivering meaningful value to our members, and it will set the organisation on a pathway to ensure that it evolves and responds to the market and member needs, and we're aiming to release that before the end of the year. Craig, our CEO, did have what I consider as the best events program planned ever for 2019. We got one event into that and COVID-19 hit, which, for an events-based organisation and a member-based organisation, that could have been catastrophic, but we managed to pivot very, very quickly. And so all of our flagship events had to be pushed out and moved online. And we did this really, really quickly in the early days of lockdown 1. So I'd just like to pay a special recognition to Craig, our CEO, and particularly our events partners who helped us pivot and maintain their support throughout. By pivoting and moving online, this is actually something that we've been wanting to do for a while, and so the COVID really provided us with that opportunity to do it quicker. So for us, I look at it as a silver lining. It's allowed us to bring forward our desire to broadcast events and to reach a much broader audience. It's more inclusive and it does align with our values. And it's already started to open up new exciting opportunities consistent with the promotion of adopting and using digital tools. We should be the ones at the forefront. In terms of our other key pillar programs, Flint, NextGen and CXO Bytes, we acknowledge that some of those programs have been very hard to deliver this year. But CXO Bytes, by comparison, was actually a core part of some of the change that we made during COVID. We intend to reinvigorate those programs before the end of the year, and Craig has already got work underway to make 2021 our best year ever. Just on the CXO Bytes program, one thing about everyone being locked up at home is access to industry leaders was actually ironically much easier than normal. So we had some great presentations, and our industry and partners helped us to deliver that. And just in closing, I'd like to thank our members and particularly our partners for supporting us. We are a member and partner-based organisation. I want to thank all of the members who have paid their invoices and continue to support 2ANZ through what has been a challenging year. Thanks to our strategic partners and particularly the event partners who really stuck with us and provided some extraordinary support this year. It's actually made a huge, huge difference to us. And to existing members, we are a member-based organisation and we do need to grow. We do need to leverage our new platform of representing all all technology users. So helping us to grow membership will also help you and benefit you in the future as well. So that's the Chair's report. Next slide, please, Craig. So I just want to hand over to Jenny Woolley, who's our Contact Officer, who will talk through proposed changes to the 2ANZ rules within the Constitution.
Thanks, Tristan. As you all would have seen from the board papers, we are proposing to make some small changes to the Constitution. First and foremost, to change the name of the organisation to reflect the broader digital technology community rather than just communications. Secondly, to more easily enable the use of electronic proxies. This is obviously something that is going to be very useful today. And thirdly is a change to clause 9.12, which enables that any board member which is appointed to replace an existing board member remains a board member for the entire term of the original board member, so that we are continuing to have some consistency in the when we have our board members voted in and out, essentially, so that we're keeping a better balance on the board. So if we can go to the next slide, please, Craig, and I'm going to please formally ask you to approve the changes to the TUANZ Constitution as reflected in the papers for the AGM on the 23rd of September 2020 to take effect from the date at which they are accepted by the Companies Office following this AGM. I'll just pause here for a moment to allow you to ponder that, as well as take any questions anyone may have around the constitutional changes before putting forward your vote. Okay, I'll take that as a no to any questions at this point, and the poll will remain open for another minute or two. So if I can ask you, Craig, to please move on to the next slide, and we will cover off the finance report. Next slide, thank you. Oh, you're ahead of the game. Alrighty. So prior to the start of 2020, we were on track and we were forecasting to deliver a second year of a small surplus in FY 2020. We had a great agenda for events, as Tristan has mentioned, and unfortunately the first 3 months of 2020 were impacted significantly by COVID-19, and we are instead today announcing a small deficit of $20,477. Now, the key drivers behind this come from having to defer income generating events, also the need to purchase software so that we could transition to running online events, and we have had one of our partners who has deferred their partnership for a year, which has resulted in this outcome. If we can move on to the next slide, please, Craig. What you'll see here is really a reflection of where we were forecasting at the end of 2019, and that our net asset position is ahead of where the 2019 financial year closed, and that remains in that position now. If we can move to the next slide, please, Craig, you'll see the net liabilities sitting there for FY 2020. And then if we can move on again, please, Craig. We do have, just to flag, that the auditors did pose a question around going concern in their audit notes, and both the board and the Chief Executive are confident that with the position we're in already for FY 2021 and the plans we have in place for next year as well, that we will be well able to weather this storm. And there was also a note in there which has gone into almost all audit reports that I've seen, is a note around the potential ongoing impacts of COVID-19. I would now ask you to please refer back to the poll and adopt the audited financial statements for the year ended 31st of March 2020. A link has been provided in the chat to those documents for those who need a copy. And if we can move on now to the last slide, the poll will remain open while I keep talking. And again, just a reminder that we will be scrutinising the votes, and they will be supplied over the next day or two once we finalise those. In terms of the forecast for 2021, we are again forecasting a small profit for the 2021 financial year. And I want to take a moment at this point on behalf of Craig, Chief Executive, and the board to thank our membership, which has remained relatively constant over this, watch the phrase everyone loves to hate, strange and interesting time. We really do appreciate the commitment to 2ANZ as an organisation, and also we'd like to thank our event sponsors who have stood by us as we've had to reshape and even delay some of our major events. We have seen, as a result of the COVID-19 impacts, a reduced travel costs. We have seen increased use of video calls, which has allowed us to forecast a lower cost base for the 2021 year. So that all contributes to the position that we are forecasting. And we've also been incredibly grateful to one of our annual partners who have been able to provide a special one-off contribution, which will help to support our work through the remainder of the 2020 calendar year and the 2021 financial year. Okay, thanks very much, Craig. I'm going to ask you to move to the next slide and hand over to you for your Chief Executive report.
Thank you very much, Tristan and Jenna. It's great to be able to bring, I think, my 6th annual report for 2ANZ, but in what has been a very unusual year to date. Even at the beginning of the year, given that the annual report really covers only up to the end of March, we saw the impact of that occurring already. These numbers that you see on the screen are some of our KPIs for the 2019-20 year. So this only runs up until the end of March 2020. So we doubled the number of our flagship events. Our flagship events are those that last longer than 3 or 4 hours. So they are at least half-day events, if not full-day events. So we've doubled the number of those. We're bringing those back. And typically they are paid events as well. Overall, we ran 29 events for the year, which was slightly down on the year before, but that was mainly due to, in the first 3 months of the year, we were already cancelling a number of new flagship events, and we were already finding after fives weren't being able to be run. 3 next gen cohorts. Happy to talk about it at some stage. Flint showed again a year of significant growth, up by 150 people on our mailing list. So that's, and I'll talk about Flint a little bit in a moment. We've got about 151 members. It's slightly down on the year before, but we're still reaching about 3,200 people when we send out information to everybody. This was what we were planning to do in 2020, because I mean, we can talk about the 2019-20 year, but really the top of mind for everybody is what's happened this year around COVID. And these were the pillars that we had set out and the flagship events we were looking to run. The year ahead did run in February. The rural event ran last week, and today we're doing a very short digital convergence symposium. The Smart Cities, there is a possibility it may still run in some form this year, and Future of Work we'll come back to. Our Future Leaders program, I'd like to talk to shortly, as well as the other 2 that are underneath there. So if we could talk about the impact of COVID-19, it just really introduced a huge uncertainty to everything. Even though we were in lockdown level 4 and we knew we were in that environment, we didn't know when we were coming out and what we could do. So Tristan rightly mentioned we've had no in-person events since the 19th of March in Hamilton. And that one was already in an environment where COVID-19 had raised its head. And so we already had a small turnout, lots of sanitizer, and the catering was individual packages to ensure that people were feeling safe. Obviously, we had to pivot online. And then with the second lockdown in Auckland, there was a number of things that got shifted as well. At level 2, you can hold events, but the big positive that most members, apart from the learnings that people get at an event, it's the networking, it's the meeting with people. And even at level 2, that's incredibly difficult to do. You still need to be seated for food, for example. So that gets very tricky, and it doesn't really fit with our model. But in the original lockdown, when we were at level 4 and 3, when the whole country was in it, we quickly ran, and I counted up 19 online events in that period. The best attended was the one that we did on 5G with Vodafone. And since then, the best that we've done is last week we did one on cybersecurity. We had over 500 people registered in that joint event that we did with KPMG. Last week we delivered the Rural Symposium, which was, I think, Plan D for that event. It might have even been Plan E. And the big ones coming up are the Future of Work in November. And we are looking, if we successfully move back to level 1 in 2 weeks' time across the country, we're looking at a couple of after fives just so we can finish the year on a high note. Jenna talked about the effect on our finances. I would just like to also express my thanks to the members and to our partners, our funding partners. And in particular, I will name the support partner that proactively provided extra funding this year, and that was Internet New Zealand. And I just checked them, we'll be thanking them formally shortly. Our name and rebrand, we went ahead with a soft launch. We decided not to wait. We changed all our electronic forms and formats, but we've made no changes to hard assets at this point. And our plan to raise the profile with media was deferred just through that period. Flint and NextGen, I am quite concerned about the sense of loss of momentum across that program, because networking again and actually meeting people is really important, which is why the Future of Work conferences in November, which are being held in Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch and Auckland, Hamilton, Wellington and Christchurch this year, will be really important for Flint, but also for Tuans, because everybody can attend those, and they will be, you know, really the first of our major events that we'll be able to hold in person, assuming we stay at level 1. And operational plans, look, we've had to defer replacing our back office another year, which does hamstring us to a point, and I do apologise if you feel that sometimes you get duplicate emails or duplicate invitations. We really do need to do some work in replacing our back office with fit for purpose technology. We just haven't been able to do that. And then around our advocacy work, we really did work to prioritise very hard on what we were doing. We've talked to the Minister and the government several times this year, just quietly in the background. Our focus in the coming short term will be on the Commerce Commission's Part 7 investigation, which is all around retail service quality and the codes that they feel they should have in place for that, and the output from the Rural Connectivity Symposium, which will be out in the next couple of weeks. So look, I think that's my report for this year. I think 2021 will certainly be full of challenges, not just from arranging events, but just because I think it's going to be a difficult year for New Zealand. So that's my report, Tristan.
Great, thank you, Craig. Now to the results of the 2020-2021 board election. Next slide, Craig. So I'm delighted to announce that we have 4 new board members, and you can see their names and photos up on the screen. So Andy Edwards, Nice Williams, Teresa Corbelis and Vaughan Baker will join the existing board, and their term it's an elected term for the next 2 years. So on behalf of the board and the members, I'd like to congratulate the new board members, and I'm very much looking forward to working with the board in the coming year. So there's your new board. Andy Edwards, Jenna Woolley, Liz Gosling, Maxine Elliott, Nice Williams, Teresa Corbelis, myself as chair until the next board meeting, Vaughan Baker, Wendy McGowan, Will Graham and Zoe Uday. And look, I'd like to pay a special thanks to Malcolm Condy, who has been on the board for quite a long time. I'm not sure actually how many years, Craig, but and he's made a significant contribution over that time, primarily acting as our finance lead, leading our finance subcommittee. And many of you who have been around for some time would have known that 2Ns has been through its share of financial turbulence, and Malcolm's guidance and expertise and tenacity has really allowed 2Ns to recover from that and to now be in the position it is. So on behalf of 2Ns and the 2Ns board, I'd like to thank Malcolm for his contribution and wish him well in the future. And we have 2 minutes to go before the digital symposium starts. So it's now time for any general business. Obviously, we would normally open this up to the floor and we could have a good old conversation, but if you do have any questions or want to make any comments, please do that now in the chat. Given we are up against 3:30 start on the digital symposium, we may take some of those questions or comments offline and get back to you if they need a more detailed response. But I'd like to open up the floor now for the next minute or so. All right, there's only one comment in there from Vanessa at Internet New Zealand. I think it's quite a fitting end to the AGM. She says, Kapai team doing a great job on behalf of Internet New Zealand. And I'd like to also echo Craig's thanks to Internet New Zealand for their contribution to 2Ns this year. It's made a real big difference, and we are genuinely appreciative of that support. So given there's no more comments, Craig, I think I'll declare the 2020 AGM.
Tristan, sorry to interrupt. Just before that, there's one that's just popped up on the Q&A.
Okay, I can't see that.
Oh, okay. It's from Roger Wineless, and he asks, would 2Ns consider joining more NZ tech organisations like Agritech NZ and others?
That's probably a matter for the board to consider, but certainly I'm happy to take that one offline with Roger and discuss that. All right, thank you very much everyone for attending, and I'll sign off now and hand back to Craig as we move into the digital symposium.